Hello everyone, welcome to the Laravel Edition meetup, the first ever Laravel Edition meetup. We have Simon Hum and the co-creator of NativePHP, and we also have our co-host Vikas Kapadia, which is active member and admin of Laravel Edition community, and you may know him with the name Marcus, right?
Hi everyone.
So yeah, before we go with the Simon Hum, I would like to ask Vikas to introduce himself.
Hi everyone. My name is Vikas. I have been a Laravel developer for 9 years. I have also worked with React Native for more than 5 years as well, and I'm looking forward to this talk. Yeah.
Okay, so I think let's go with the Simon. Can you say introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Simon. I'm a PHP developer. Hopefully, like many of you, have been doing it for a long time. And yeah, as Punyapal said, I am the co-creator of NativePHP, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. So I hope you'll enjoy that. Thanks for the great intro, guys. It's nice to be here with you.
Yeah. So let's go. We have lots of people in the comments. Yeah. Okay, so before we go to the actual talk, right? We should ask you some questions, right? To know about you more, and people can also know about you more. So, very first question come to my mind is, when did you first start working on PHP and Laravel?
I started working with PHP over 20 years ago. So it's been a long time. I started with PHP when PHP 4 was still really the thing that was used, and I learned how to use PHP 5 mainly for its like object oriented stuff. So yeah, that's how I got into PHP. Anyway, that's the first bit, I guess.
And Laravel?
Well, obviously Laravel didn't exist at that time. So it was some years went by before I got into Laravel. I came across it pretty much almost as soon as it was released because I was building a framework at the same time, which I was trying to make open source. I think everybody was kind of doing that then. And I mean, it was just better. It was just better than mine. So it was a simple like, I just need to use this instead. But I didn't actually start using it for a couple more years. So this was probably around about 2014. Yeah, and I started to use it on projects for the company that I was working for.
Right.
So I've been
So
doing Laravel for over 10 years already.
yeah. So what framework you were using before Laravel?
I mean, I really didn't get along with other frameworks very well, which is why I started to build my own framework, because I
Oh,
felt like I wanted it to work a certain way that sort of my brain was working, and these other frameworks were like just too different from the way that I thought it should be. But that's when I saw Laravel and I was like, well, this works the way that my brain works. It actually looks kind of like my framework, but way better. So I should use this one instead.
yeah.
Right.
What inspired to develop the desktop and mobile apps using PHP?
Wow. Do you know, I think ever since um, the iPhone was introduced, I've wanted to use PHP to, build apps on there because by that point I'd already spent maybe 5 years building with PHP, maybe a bit more
Okay.
than that, but so I'd invested a lot of time, in learning PHP and doing things with PHP, and I was just like, it would be so great if we could use PHP on this environment. But yeah, obviously that's taken a little bit longer.
Yeah. Uh, could you tell? So you also have a platform called Laravel Devs, right? Can you tell a
Lara
story
devs, yeah.
behind? Yeah. Can you give us more info and some backstory on that sort platform as well?
Yeah, so Lara Devs was actually built by another company,
Oh,
and they ran it for I think just about a year or so, before I took it over. Um,
okay.
and I acquired the site from them because I wanted to build a platform like that, and they'd already built it. They'd already built it in Laravel for Laravel developers. So it was like very much already what I wanted from it. And I made them an offer that they accepted. So I started then building the site and trying to improve it. I've spent a lot of time on that and a lot of money as well, trying to get it to a place where it's better than it was. I think it's there, but um, it's a very time intensive project, and yeah, at the moment it's not quite as popular as I would like it to be. So I'm not spending as much time building stuff on there at the moment. I'm investing my time elsewhere. But
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
still approving people's profiles, making sure that profiles make sense, and trying to drive traffic to the site as much as possible. So, I think it's a great place to get your profile online still, because there's not many places that are specifically for Laravel developers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So like,
That is interesting. Yeah.
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 So like,
Definitely.
what do you enjoy doing when you are not doing native PHP?
Sleeping, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a
I mean,
great answer. Yeah.
I do like to eat food occasionally and drink. I do drink some wine and some beer occasionally as well.
Yeah.
Not too often. But yeah, I mean, I have a dog, so I take the
Oh,
dog for walks, and I have a wife, so I take the wife for walks. No, um, I I try and take care of her as good as she takes care of me. So I fail at that miserably a
Right.
lot, but
Right. Right.
she's very good. So yeah, I
that is
mean,
really
I don't have many hobbies, but
okay.
Okay.
Uh, uh, on Twitter, like for example, if you go and check for PHP, you see lots of meme, majority from Nepal, like PHP is that, PHP that, and with the AI, majority programming language are gonna be there in 5 to 3 months. People are saying. So, what do you advise to the new people that are coming to PHP world and uncertain about continuing as a PHP developer?
wow, that's a really hard question, because we're on the we're right on the edge of all of this stuff happening to all of us. It's not just happening to juniors, it's happening to seniors and people who've been doing this for a really long time as well.
Okay.
So it's difficult to come up with a clear like answer. This is just my opinion right now, and we'll see how it plays out in a few years. But I don't think for one moment that AI means that a language is going to die. So I don't think we'll see the end of various programming languages. They might not be used as much because as people start to rely on the large language models to give them answers to things, those models may not suggest certain languages as much as others. They might promote JavaScript, for example, more so because probably in the training data for those models, there's a lot of examples of JavaScript. But there are also some languages that are very specific to specific problem spaces. Like, for example, if you're building an iPhone app, the LLM will most likely say to you these days, well, you should use Swift or you can use Objective-C. So, I don't think that's going to see the end of languages. The thing with PHP specifically is it's pretty much the only language that was built for the web. We can put JavaScript to one side. JavaScript started as a client-facing language. It was in the browser. It didn't exist anywhere else. PHP was the kind of equivalent on the server. And so no other language has been really built to handle the web the way that PHP has. And that's quite amazing when you think about it, that for 30 years, PHP has been the only language to do this well. That's quite incredible, really. So I just don't think that PHP is going to go away anytime soon, and I don't think that LLMs are going to be the cause of it going away. I think people are going to be using PHP for a long time. I certainly hope that they are, because I want to. I like using it, and I've invested a lot of time in it at this point. 20 plus years is a long time, so um, I definitely have a bit of sunk cost there. But it is what it is. I think we also have to be adaptable. We have to learn to roll with the times. I'll talk about this in a little while, but I really think we should embrace the AI stuff as much as we can, and make it help us do better things.
Right. Awesome, awesome, great advice.
Okay. Like I was also having one more question, like in my mind, like you wanted to build the mobile apps, right, with the PHP, but like so why did you build the desktop apps first?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so I um I didn't know how to build mobile apps. I've worked on teams that have built mobile apps. I've helped get mobile apps into production, but I've never built one before. Um, and I know that there are lots of challenges in that area of complexity. So
Right.
I could have started there. When I started on native PHP 2 or 3 years ago, but the the way that I looked at it was, that's going to be harder for me to get to a place where I can show something to people. I wanted to be able to do something that was going to be able to show people there's some benefit here. And I did that, I think, within maybe 3 or 4 months of starting actually working on it. I think it would have taken me a lot longer. I mean, I know that the iPhone stuff that I've been able to do now, with the advent of all of the AI stuff that we've got, I wouldn't have had that back then, not to the same quality as it is now. The tooling just wouldn't be there. A lot of the stuff that I have benefited from has come from native PHP for desktop. So starting with mobile, probably I'd still be working on it today.
Right. Vikas, do you have any questions?
No, I think we are good. We can move to the presentation,
Okay.
and yeah.
Okay, I have one last question. Like, see, like, we have like developed the mobile apps, right? Like we are developing, like, not fully, but we started, right? We are already developing the desktop applications, right? Uh, like we already seen the Dan, yeah, maybe Dan, who was building like hardware, like embedding something with the pinout, I guess, right? So like what possibilities you like think of, like we gonna build with the PHP in future, right?
It's difficult to, like, I don't there's going to be technologies that aren't even here yet that we could use PHP for if it's in the right shape. So I PHP is just a language, and if it's built in the right way to work in these different places, then it can work exactly the same as any other language that runs in those environments. So the sky is the limit in that sense. I think if you think, oh, that device only works with Python or C or Rust or so, PHP can work there too, definitely. Whether you should or not is a different matter. But
Yeah, right,
the possibility is that PHP can work anywhere.
right, yeah,
What I personally would like to see is that people just try. It doesn't have to be that we're using PHP to build coffee machines and televisions and all of this, but I think it's interesting when you see projects like what Dan's doing and other people in the community are doing all sorts of really interesting things with PHP, that there are just people who give it a go. I think that's the best thing to come out.
yeah. Like I also seen one thing that like TypeScript is rewritten in the Go, right?
Yeah.
And one of the core team member of PHP was looking for some guys who can like say like go for PHP or something. So
Mm.
it can be like they may rewrite the PHP in any like other language, and we will have a generics and all stuff. Like maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I think we already have, like, Go Runner is the PHP, right? Written in a Go language, which you can use for the Octane. Yeah. So It is already there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, okay, so like more of the questions are already finished from our side, right? Now we can hand over the stage to you, and the whole 30-45 minutes, whatever you wanna take, it will be all yours. No, yeah. But before
Okay.
that, I wanna say that if you have any questions for Simon, you can comment. We will take few questions in the end, right? Cool. Okay. So now you can share your screen and go ahead.
Entire screen 2. Right. So we've got a blank screen in front of us. What do we do? Well, the thing that I want to do for those of you who are here now, and maybe those of you watching later on, is just to go kind of deep into exactly how this works on iOS. And we'll talk about Android as well, because I know everybody is asking about Android. But I want to go deep on this in a way that I've not done in any other talks that I've given recently. I've really only been able to scratch the surface of some of the things that are going on, and I've kind of jumped around, and I've got this part where I do some code, and then that part where I do some speaking in my talks. And this time I just want to do it as it's all code, and I'm gonna sort of do it as a live stream. I haven't prepared this super well because I know this code very well. But the point is to take you through kind of how it works, what my thinking process was to get to this point, how I got to that point, and then hopefully it'll give you some ideas about how you can do some stuff like this in the future. Maybe it'll spark some interest in building some apps of your own, like iPhone apps and Android apps using this technology. But if you take just one thing away from the whole session, the thing that I want you to walk away with is a desire to try and build stuff like this, to not be put off by the complexity that seems to be in front of you when doing things like this. So let's start at the beginning. If you've used PHP or Laravel, you've probably been using it to build a web application. And that's great. PHP is built to build web applications. That's its whole reason for existence. And PHP is great at doing that. It's a fantastic language for building web applications. Why? Because it's
Simon,
oh,
sorry for interrupting. People
yeah.
are asking to zoom a little bit.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. There's no this folder structure can't get any bigger, unfortunately. But when I've got code on there, it'll get bigger. I know I'm just talking at the moment. But yeah, we'll get to that. So where was I? PHP, web applications. It started life as a templating language, right? So you could write PHP code straight in the HTML files. You'd put those files on a server, and when the server processed the request, it would load that file, and it would see PHP tags in the file, and it would run the file through the PHP engine, and it would it would read the code in those PHP tags and swap it out for the output that would come from the PHP engine. So the code would run, it would render some text, and that text would go where the PHP code was. And the HTML file would come back down to the client, to the person's web browser, and they would just see a finished HTML page. They wouldn't see any PHP code at all. This is the fundamental paradigm of how the web, with PHP, certainly worked, going back to the late 90s. And yeah, as I said before, no other languages really tackled this in the same way. There was ASP, which became ASP.NET, and other languages have kind of come at this problem from we're a programming language, how do we do the web? PHP started life as the templating language and became a programming language. So it's very different, and I think the spirit of that has carried through PHP for the last 30 years. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. PHP is built for the web. And when we're using it in this way, we always because of this, we always think about PHP as running through a server. So you think of PHP, you think, I've maybe got a web server like Apache or Nginx sitting on a physical machine somewhere. It might be virtualized through other layers of abstraction, but essentially there's a computer somewhere in the world that has got some software on it that can listen to requests coming over the network. So a web request from a browser, let's say, and it's digesting that information and it's saying, what do I need to do with this? And it says, I need to send this to a program called PHP. And I just need to get PHP's response. And then I send that back to the client. So this very simple paradigm, request, I will make this bigger so that you can see it a bit better. That's the wrong button. Hopefully that's big enough. Request to server, right? Apache or Nginx to PHP, and then it goes back to the server and then back to the client as a response. Yeah, hopefully that's sort of tracks. And this paradigm has unlocked the entire way that we do so many things in the modern world. It has been really a world-changing thing, and it's not PHP specifically that's done that, but there are layers and layers of technology here that have made that possible. This is great. This is where we were a few years ago with PHP. This is how you would use it. You have to have it on a server. You have to have web browsers interacting with it. We're in a different place today. We don't need quite these things. We're still going to have a request, but we're going to get rid of the server. We're just going to speak to PHP. So we don't need these steps. I didn't really include the browser, but it's like round the outside, top and bottom, but we're still going to have those parts. So we'll look at how that works and why we're still doing things that way. But yeah, that's the baseline of where we're at with PHP. The one other issue that we have, because of the way that PHP has been constructed, which is very good for what it's built for, but it's typically built in a way that is dynamic in nature. And what do I mean by that? Well, if I say to you, you can load extensions in PHP. If you've ever had to do it, do you know how to load extensions in PHP? Turns out it's really, really easy. Unlike most applications that you would compile for your computer operating system that you're trying to compile for, PHP extensions are dynamic. So they're not compiled into PHP. When you're running it on a web server, you can have extensions be dynamic libraries, and you might see them on a Linux system as .so files. On Mac, they're usually called dylibs, and on Windows, they're called DLLs. You will load those files at runtime into PHP. So when PHP spins up, when it's responding to a request, it will load the extensions from these dynamic libraries into itself, and then it can do different things. And PHP's got loads of extensions. We won't talk about too many of those, but classic ones would be MySQL or Postgres. And we wrap those up in, gosh, the name of it's gone straight out of my head. P something. Why have I forgotten that? But the database library, the kind of PDO, that's the one. I knew it would come back. So these are all extensions of PHP that aren't compiled into it directly. Some of them are part of PHP's core, like PDO is part of the core, but it can be an extension that you don't have to compile it into PHP. And this is good for loads of reasons, right? PHP then can be compiled to be very small. So you can have a very small core executable. Okay. And that's great because a small executable is a fast executable. And when you want then functionality to be loaded in at different points in time, the benefit that brings you is you don't need to reload. So, well, or recompile. That's not quite strictly true because you do need to reload, but you don't need to recompile PHP to load a new extension. Not normally. Most extensions are built so that you can just put them in the right place, rerun PHP with the configuration. So you might have done that in a PHP ini file, and it loads that new extension straight away. Great. That saves loads of headache for system administrators and all sorts of other people along the chain. PHP is super flexible. That's basically what we're saying. And this is typically how we've been using it for 30 years. But PHP is so capable. It's capable of so much more. It's capable of things that we've never thought of using it for if we've been just focused on the web stuff because we've never had to think about it. Did you know PHP can be compiled statically? What does that mean? Well, for one, it means that it can't be extended dynamically at runtime. So no more DLLs. They get compiled in, basically. So you would end up with a PHP executable in the same way that you would if you compiled it dynamically, but now all of the functionality that you want is hard-coded into it. It can't be pulled in at runtime. Technically, it can be as well, but we'll just differentiate those two. So statically, you don't load it in at runtime. Dynamically, you can. And a static compilation has a few other benefits. They are also generally a bit faster. But the greatest thing about it is that instead of having to have a single executable and then a bunch of extensions all around the outside that all have to live together and have to be coordinated together and configured together, a static binary is just one file. So we end up with one file, php.exe, for example, on Windows. And this changes everything about what we can do with PHP. No more do you need to have somebody, a system administrator typically, who knows what they're doing in compiling applications to be able to put PHP onto another server. You can just take the executable that's built for exactly what you need, and you can just put that on that machine. If it's built for a Linux machine, you can put it on a Linux machine, and generally it will just work. You don't have to configure anything special. You don't have to have loads of files everywhere. Just that one file. Fantastic. We can do that for every environment. So we can do it for Windows, we can do it for Linux, and we can do it for Mac. With those three different types of executables, for most systems that are out there today, that means you can just send a person a version of PHP, a copy of that file, that executable, and they now have PHP on their machine. They haven't got to do anything else. It's brilliant. It's fantastic. And the great thing that's come out of that, well, there's a few things. Obviously, the one that we're here to talk about, NativePHP exists because of that. Other projects exist because of that as well. Laravel Herd and FrankenPHP. You might have heard of some of these. You might have used some of them. They all depend upon this ability of PHP to be able to be compiled statically and to be distributable in this way across different machines, different environments, without all of the complexity and configuration of a dynamic PHP. So this is super powerful stuff. This is great. Suddenly PHP is open to so much more. And we can do a lot more with it like this. So that's all good. That lets us get to the place where we can build like desktop applications that run on PHP that don't require somebody to have PHP already installed on their machine, because we can give them PHP with our application so that they've got everything that they need. But we don't want to stop there. We want to get PHP everywhere. We want to get PHP on every device there is, starting with the next one. And the obvious next one is phones. And this is a trick. I already mentioned this, but getting built on phones, a static version of PHP that can be distributed onto a phone, is a little bit harder. And I say a little bit in a very sarcastic way because it's a lot harder. Not only do we have to compile it statically, we actually have to compile it as an embeddable. This is something that I didn't even know PHP could do until about a year ago. You can have a static embeddable that is just a C library. This is, you might be familiar with the C language, you might not, but a C library is basically just, well, it's like those DLLs or .so files that we were talking about before. It's kind of packaged up application that's just ready to go. You just need to place it in the right place, but it's not executable directly. So you can't just take that file and run it like an executable. It won't work. It's just library code. If you take Laravel, for example, you take all of that makes up Laravel as a framework and you just package it up into a single file and you give it to somebody and you say, here, there's a Laravel application, but it's not the application, it's just the framework. Will it work? Probably not. There's going to be a whole load of errors. There's going to be a bunch of things that aren't configured because that's not how Laravel works. It's a library of code. And that's exactly what a static embeddable is too. It's just a library of code. It's basically the binary representation of the raw C code that's been compiled, ready for a given architecture so that the machine can understand how to operate it, but it doesn't know how to operate it directly. It must be embedded inside another application. And when we've got a version of PHP that can be built this way, we can embed it in another application. We can embed it in any application that can run C library code. You know what can run C library code? Phones. So now we've got a version of PHP that can run on a phone. I'm not going to talk about how we got to that point because that's super complicated and maybe a bit too much for this one. I have talked about it on other talks that I've given, and I'll probably end up talking about it in more detail on other ones in the future, so look out for those. But there's basically a library that we use called Static PHP CLI. This is a fantastic library. You should check it out. It's on GitHub. I can't remember the URL off the top of my head, but you'll find it if you do a Google search for it. And this takes a lot of the pain out of building PHP statically, except it didn't work for building for iPhone and Android, not until now. In the last few weeks, I've made it capable of building for phones. So I'm going to share that back with everybody soon. But basically, now that we've got this, we can build a version of PHP for an iPhone that will live inside of a Swift application, or for an Android that will live inside of the Java application. And then that means we can have our Swift code or our Java code calling PHP. Okay, I've talked so much about all of this stuff now. You're probably dead bored and you just want me to show you some stuff. So let's do that. We're going to look at actually how does this work inside of a Swift application in a lot more detail. I'm going to start off by looking at the file system real quick because I can't, for some reason, Sublime doesn't show me these files in here. But if I go to NativePHP Mobile, we look at this libraries folder. I don't know if that's big enough, or if I can make it any bigger, I'll try, but no. Well, if you can't quite make this out, no worries. But basically, these few files here are all of the dependencies plus PHP that are needed to run a Laravel application on a phone. These are the compiled libraries of PHP and its dependencies that are ready to be used by a Swift application. Compiled libraries in this context are .a files. So we've got those. These ones are built for an actual iPhone, and we've also got ones built for the iPhone simulator in exactly the same setup. Everything is the same except for their compile target. So these ones will only work on a simulator, and these ones will work on an actual phone. They won't work on my Mac. They won't work on another operating system at all. They won't work on an Android. These are built specifically for iPhone and iPhone simulator. So with those files in place, and then also the various C header files, which are needed for your application to know where everything actually lives in those object files, what's available to you or to it, we need these header files, basically. So we have these for all of those dependencies and for PHP. There's a lot of them for PHP, all of its core, all of its extensions that are built in, etc. There's a ton of stuff there. Cool. So we've got all of that in the right shape. Let's have a look at how this actually works. The next step is to make sure that we tell the application how to use those custom libraries that we've given it. And in a Swift application, we do this with a module map file. This is, as far as I understand it, I don't know an awful lot about Swift, but this is the kind of newest way of doing this stuff. So this module set is PHP. This is, we tell PHP, we tell Swift, this is where PHP lives. It's called libphp.a. So we can just link that as this PHP file. And we tell it where its headers are. They're in this place. That's where we want to look for all those header files. And we do that for all of the modules that are part of the application. So everything that we want to include, all of those C libraries that we want to include in our Swift application, we define them in this module map. There'll be an equivalent to this in Android, but it won't be exactly the same. So we got to do things twice everywhere for everything that we do here, pretty much. That's a little bit annoying because it's time consuming, but we're doing it. I'll show you that later. So we've got our modules all plugged in. We've got PHP loaded in properly now. It's compiled for the right platforms, etc. How do we get PHP to run now that it's in this environment? This could be where we get really deep on how a Swift application works and all of that setup. I want to glaze over a lot of that. You can go and find that out for yourself in your own time. But I'm going to jump into some of the basics so that we can just get a high level understanding. Basically, your application in Swift starts with the main application file. And in our case, it's this native PHP where it's declared as main. This native PHP app file and struct act as the entry point for this application. You can kind of think of it like the index.php file that your web server will try to load when it's loading your website or application. It's not exactly the same, but in principle, it's achieving the same kind of goal. And everything in this application happens as part of a loop that this is basically setting up for us. And this is our opportunity to tell the entire application what we want to do. And from here, we go into all of the different files that make up our application and do different things, just as you would in a PHP app. In this case, we have what's called a scene. When you think of most phone apps on an iPhone, they've got what you would have called maybe windows before. They're not windows on a phone. It takes over the entire screen. So on iOS, they've called it a scene. And it does have a concept of windows. These are slightly different from windows on a desktop machine or your laptop. But they are the kind of construction points for where we can put our user interface into. And so we have a single user interface in this entire application, which I've just called for simplicity Content View. That is a class of its own. We'll have a look at that in a second. I'll get it ready. So it's this one, but we're gonna see what makes that up in a second. You'll notice here as well, there's this init function, which seems to do something PHP related because it says prepare PHP environment. Let's talk about that for a second. This init function runs at the very beginning of the application's lifecycle. Pretty much. I mean, I'm using very simplistic terms. Somebody who knows Swift in detail will tell me otherwise. That's fine. I'm not here to be specific about the detail, but essentially this is running at the start. We're preparing PHP. What does that do? So this function is quite straightforward in some respects. This is the kind of stuff that if you've deployed a Laravel application, you might do it in production. You know, the things that you will do to get an application, a Laravel application running on a production server. You might do things like setting up the environment file, might do things like creating a database, might do things like migrating the database or clearing caches. So this sort of thing will be happening right at the beginning of the application's lifecycle. Every time it opens on the phone, we'll be checking to see, do we need to create the database? Do we need to migrate the database? Do we need to clear any caches? And just get our Laravel, our PHP environment in the right shape to run our Laravel app in a ready state. So we've done those things. We've got a database. We've migrated it. We're all set. Now what? Well, this is where our content view comes back into play. Sorry, this search is going to jump around a little bit. Because this main is a specific type of class in the world of a Swift application, this body that we're setting, which is a property of this struct, is basically ready to be used by Swift when it already knows what to do with this. And it's going to try and load this content view. So that's kind of where we need to go next. So let's jump into the content view and see what happens. So the content view itself, I don't think actually exists. Yeah, it's very simple. So this is just, it's loading a specific view into itself. And we're just loading a web view. So we're loading the web view that we'll look into in a moment. These can all happen in the same file. You can see I've got structs and classes all in the same file. Swift is fine with that. PHP is technically fine with that, but we don't typically do that. We tend to have just one class per file in PHP. So this is a little bit different. I could split all of these out into separate files, but I don't have to, so I haven't. That's just me being lazy. It's okay to be lazy sometimes. We're software engineers. Let's go into the web view itself, because this is where the fun really starts to happen. So I'm going to skip to the top and we can talk about this. Well, maybe not from the very top, because I've just realized I've added more stuff in here recently that we don't necessarily need to read. There, that's what I want. I want the init function for this. So this struct has an init as well. And the init here is doing some very interesting things. Things that I really want to spend probably most of the time that we've got left talking about, because this is the most exciting part for me. How to get PHP running on the phone, we've done. How do we get it to execute our application when we don't have a web server? There's nothing about this Swift application that's creating a web server. We're not calling out to a web server on the internet. We don't want to be calling on the internet just to load our application. We want our application to be on the device. We want it to load straight away. As soon as the user taps on the icon on their phone, we want it to appear, and we want our Laravel application to run and load the latest rendered view of the page straight away without any network involvement at all, if we can possibly do so. But the thing that we're really not able to do if we want that to be performant and accepted as a viable application on the app stores is have a web server running constantly just to serve our application that's already on the device. Because that creates this kind of weird network environment on the device where it's opening a port to itself and then it's loading files from itself just to serve them in this sort of loop back kind of, what would you call it? Localhost, like localhost. That's overkill for what we're trying to do. If the files are there, the system is capable of doing it on its own without the web server, then can't we just get rid of the web server? We said earlier we have done that. How does that even work? It works because we're using what's called a web view. The web view is basically a web browser. It's the building block of a web browser. The web view is exactly what it says. It's the view that loads HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and passes all of those things. We're in a really fortunate time where this technology is advanced to the point where we can have an interface like this web view class, this WK web view, that just abstracts all of that complexity, how to load the HTML, how to render it in chunks, how to parse the CSS link and load it, how to parse the JavaScript, how to parse JavaScript files from a different place, run all of that at the right time. All of that's abstracted away. We don't have to worry about any of it. We just use this WK web view. That also exposes some incredibly powerful functionality that a normal web browser doesn't give us. The WK web view is a building block of a browser. So if you think about what a browser has to do, then you'll start to realize all of the things that might be possible with just a WK web view or some other web view on other devices. A WK web view doesn't know anything really about HTTP and HTTPS, and it knows that they're a thing. They're default schemes. They're called schemes that can load content from the network. They're expected to go and load a URL, a resource locator that is going to call out to the network and bring some information back. And it's expecting to get maybe HTML, maybe JSON, maybe something else, and do something with it. But beyond that, it's kind of as flexible as we want it to be. We could tell it, well, I don't want to use HTTP or HTTPS. I want to use my own thing. I want to use my own scheme that instead of calling out to the network, looks only on the device for files that are already on the device. And instead of just loading static HTML files into the web view, I want it to actually run something. I want it to run PHP instead. And I want it to take the output of PHP and I want it to load that into the web view. Hopefully you can see already all of these pieces falling into place that really enable PHP to run on an iPhone or Android. I just want to dive in. We've really only got a few more minutes, but I just want to dive into this scheme handler because this is where the real magic. Am I allowed to call it magic? I don't think so. Not anymore. It's not magic. This isn't magic. This is just hard work. This is where the real hard work happens. So let's have a look at this PHP scheme handler for a few minutes. First thing, again, we're looking at this init function. Now, this is a kind of a type of a class that extends another class. We're familiar with that in PHP. This one extends a WK URL scheme handler. And so it's already got an init method in it. And we have to override that to do our custom functionality here. But the thing that we're doing in this init function is basically just getting the Swift application ready to execute PHP in what is called a background thread. So we put PHP's execution, at least on an iPhone, in the background. That way, when we're executing PHP, it doesn't block the whole application whilst it's waiting for PHP to respond. This is a native thing that the phone can do. It's very capable. It's simplified. It don't take it too far. It can get very complicated. But this basically just means that when we run PHP through the phone, it's not going to stop the rest of the application from running. And if something crashes in PHP, hopefully it's not going to crash a whole application and we can just try again. That's not a lot. This is clearly not doing everything that could be done here to load PHP. Where's all of that stuff? Don't know. Well, it's coming. So here we have this. Okay, just one little point. You'll see these functions seem to look the same. We can't do this in PHP. This is an interesting thing about Swift, actually. The signature of a function is not just its name. In PHP, it is basically just its name. In Swift, it's actually all of its parameters as well. So you can have functions with the same name as long as they've got different parameters. This one's got a stop. This one's got a start. I think that's quite cool. It allows similarly named functions or exactly the same named functions to behave differently. I just think that's interesting and something I've learned about Swift and how it's different from PHP. Right. What are we going on about here? Well, this is a special function in the context of this scheme handler class that we're in, this web view function. This is a default function within the scheme handler and it receives the web view and it receives a task. As you can see, these are start or stop. We won't go into the detail of what all of that means, but essentially we can handle when the web view starts to receive a request, and we can handle when it has been told to stop handling a request. So this is basically like a web server receiving the request, and then it's calling out to PHP and doing some stuff. We can just have it now call PHP. So yeah, there's no web server here, but this kind of looks like a web server is starting to appear. We'll go into what our start loading function looks like. Here we look at the task that we're being sent, and we actually, the names are eerily similar to things we might be used to. One of the features of a task is called the request. And so we capture the request out of that and we do some work on it. We now have all of the kind of web server related activity that we need to do because we don't have a web server to do it for us. So we extract all of this data from the request, what we call request data. There's things like the URL, the headers, cookies, might be post data, some document that's been submitted along with the request. And we have to break all of that out because at this point, this is only Swift that's dealing with the request. There's no PHP here yet. And we need to get from here into PHP. So we've got to pull all of these things apart, package them up in a nice way, and then get PHP to handle them for us. And that's exactly what we do. I'm not going to go into all of the detail of this because there's a lot to it. We have to think about how do we handle static files like images, JavaScript files, and CSS. We have to think about how we store cookies because we still want to use cookies and things like that. How do we do that safely? How do we pull them out? How do we deal with tokens like the cross-site request forgery? Even though we might not need that on our phone environment, we still need to think about it because that's how Laravel thinks about our application. We might need to take care of it. So there's some of that. But we get to this really important piece, which is now that we've figured out all of the stuff for the request, we just want to send that to PHP. We want to give PHP everything that it needs to think of this as if it was a web request. So we don't really want to change the way that PHP is working. We don't want it to think it's in a different environment because that would be too much work. That would be too much like hard work. We want PHP to think it's still in its safe little bed of a web server. Yep, we're lying to PHP, but I don't care, and neither does PHP. So we're just going to forward this request data along the chain, and PHP is going to do something with it. But let's see, just in the last couple of moments, what this actually looks like. Maybe this one gives us an idea. We call this get response. I won't go into that. That's the bit that actually goes out and does all of the work. But once we've received the success, here we just create what we call a HTTP response. So it's that same cycle. Request, like browser, remember, around the outside. I know I didn't visualize that very well, but the browser, the request. Oh, it's gone. Yeah, well, it was long ago, wasn't it? The browser, the request, PHP, and the response, and then the browser again on the outside. And that's it. Our HTTP response comes from PHP, and as long as it's in the right shape, we finish this task. Basically, our application knows that it's received HTML, CSS, JavaScript. It can load it into the web view, and we can just let the web view do what the web view does. That's basically how you run PHP on a phone. I know that's quite high level still, and I'm sure you've got loads of questions about how all of this works. I'm happy to go into more detail. But before I jump to questions, which I know you're all itching to do, I just want to leave with one kind of final piece. Everyone bar none has said to me after I've talked about this, when is it going to be ready for Android? And I've been telling them, I don't know, because honestly, I thought that's way down the line. I don't know if I'm going to have time to do that. But something incredible happened after I announced this at Laracon EU at the beginning of February. A good friend of mine, Shane Rosenthal, came to me and he said, "Mate, look what I've been working on." And he had basically been working on making it work on Android at the same time as I've been making it work on iPhone. And we've got Android very, very close to being ready already, thanks to Shane. So I just want to show you, if I can find my Android Studio, exactly what that looks like. So this is, I'm going to stop it so I can prove to you, this is actually, if you've done anything with Android Studio or any Android development at all, hopefully you'll be familiar with some of these things. But if not, this, although it looks like PHP Storm, it's built by the same people, but it's Android Studio. And this is what you use to build Android apps. And here we have a Laravel application. It's just a pretty normal, basic starter kit Laravel 12 application. Nothing really special has been done to it. We have got some entry points that are different. We won't go into the detail of those, but this just allows us to work with the phone environment slightly differently to how a normal Laravel application would work with a web environment. Basically, I can just hit play here. I know this is all a bit too small. The focus should be on this screen. That's all the bit that I worried about. And there you go. That is a native application running on an Android emulator in this case at the moment, because I haven't got it working on the real device, but an Android device without the network, without a web server. There's no calling out to the internet and getting this page and loading it up into a web view. This is happening in this emulator. If I could turn off my internet connection and show you, I would, but I can't because that would kill the stream. So I can't prove that to you right now, but you can know that this is working on Android right now. And we will have this packaged up within the next few, I don't know. Shane's going to curse me if I give any promises, but I don't think it's going to be very long. I think we're talking about weeks at the most. So look out for that very, very soon. That's it for this time. I think that's probably enough for all of you. You might have your heads exploding. I don't know where you are in the world. Different places. You might be a bit late, might be a bit early. So I'm sorry if this was too late or too early for you to grasp all of this stuff, but feel free to reach out to me either now, later, on Twitter, on Blue Sky, wherever you can find me. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so let's go with the questions. So first Jigar have asked one question, Jigatula, that what is the current static PHP binary file size which we are using in iOS or Android?
The PHP binary on iOS is about 50 megabytes, but that's kind of like with everything. So by everything I mean all of the extensions that we need for Laravel. So yeah, that's it. I think that's quite good. I think that's a very reasonable app size, because your app isn't going to be much bigger than that. You know, a Laravel app code, we can get that down to very small. We will get it down to being very, very small. So yeah, I definitely see lots of huge apps on the app stores, and with PHP apps, they're not going to be huge. They're going to be very light.
Yeah.
So if you when you talk about everything, right? So what is included in it? The database driver and all the extensions.
Yep. So I don't want to talk too much about this on this session because it's a deep topic, but when it comes to like the database, for example, like we have a database driver, we use SQLite. So it's the only database driver that's included with native PHP across the board, like desktop and mobile. And there's a really good reason for that. Basically, it doesn't make sense to have another database driver. SQLite is the only database engine that can run from just a single file. If you wanted to use another database driver, you'd have to have that database engine installed on the user's device. And that's just not going to be possible really on an iPhone or an Android. I mean, maybe technically it's possible, but for the most part, you don't want to be worrying about getting users to have that kind of setup. And it's the same on desktop as well. If you want to ship apps to normal users, you don't want to be telling them, go and install MySQL, go and install Postgres, and then you can use our app. You just want to ship your app and have it work. And you do that with SQLite. That's the industry standard for doing any kind of distributed software these days. Having said that, yeah, there are cases where you might want to be able to connect to different databases. We're going to have a path for that in the future. But to answer your kind of wider question about what's included, there's SQLite, there's curl and OpenSSL, so that you can actually call out to third-party APIs directly from PHP. So you haven't got to try and do that through Swift. We might get rid of that at some point if we can, but because the phones are quite, Swift and Android Java are quite capable of connecting to the network and using HTTPS and all of those kinds of things on their own. So shipping curl and OpenSSL with these PHP is a little bit overkill in my view, but for now it keeps things simple. It means that we can not have to do too much work. So we've got that. We have things like XML and zip, so we can use those extensions within PHP. There's a couple more like low-level extensions that you'd typically need for running Laravel, but there's nothing any real special about those. So I would say it's very bare bones. We could start compiling other extensions as well if we needed to. I don't think it makes too much sense at this point in time. The most important one, and I didn't really talk about this at all in this talk because I've talked about it in a bit more detail in other talks, but there is one extension that we have to include that's a custom one that we built specifically for native PHP, and it's what enables the native functionality to work on the phone. Yeah, I mean, maybe you got some questions about that already. I don't know.
Yeah. I also, so what about imaging? For example, if you're uploading image and you also want to manipulate or resize them on your mobile, you require the imagic extension, and it is very one to hard to build even for Windows as well. So is it included or are you still working on that?
We haven't included. I think GD is in there with, and I think that doesn't have all of the support for like JPEGs
Yes.
and things
Yeah.
yet. But we will get those definitely. I think that makes sense. I don't know about image magic or iMagic, whatever way you want to refer to that. Just because that usually requires a little bit more platform support. You know, GD is like kind of baked into PHP, so where iMagic is a little bit, from my understanding anyway, iMagic's a little bit more complicated. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think we can get to a place where a reasonable set of tools are available for people to use, and they can build like the custom versions of PHP that they need to build to run their applications on phones. I definitely see that we'll be able to do that. I don't think it's going to be like very soon, just to be clear, because there's a lot of other work that we're trying to do, but we'll get all of this stuff supported for sure.
Awesome. We have one more question. Since it's called native PHP for iOS or for mobile, I assume there is support for other framework, PHP framework, or even a vanilla PHP. Right now, it is right now just for Laravel.
I'm gonna say we're focusing on Laravel. Like that's the team behind this. You know, me, Marcel, Shane, who's getting involved. A lot of the contributors that are involved, they're all very comfortable with Laravel. And it just makes sense for us because that's what we're used to building with, and it's very, very good. Like it's the best PHP framework on the market. I won't say that we'll never support other frameworks. I think there will be a time when people want to use this to do that, but the reality is going to be that, you know, like native PHP for desktop is fully open source. Anybody can take all of that stuff. They can go and build a version for Symfony. They could contribute it back to native PHP if they wanted to, or they could go and build their own version of native PHP and have that just exist. And I would gladly support either one of those ways of doing this because the more PHP is being used by people to do these things, the better, in my view. And you could do the same with the mobile stuff eventually too. I just think for this small, we're a very small core team of people working on this. It doesn't make sense for us to try and split out and work also on Symfony. You know, then you've got to get Symfony working for Mac, Windows, Linux, iOS, Android. You know, it's like, ugh.
Right.
One framework at a time is enough for now, I think.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, on the continue there on the same question, since we are focusing on Laravel support, can you tell us how much of Laravel is supported in iOS? Like, is there any part of Laravel framework that does not work right now on a mobile?
Yeah, there probably will be some parts that don't work because there are some extensions that we've not included yet. They've not been compiled in. So I think one at the top of my mind is the Intel extension, INTL,
Okay. Yeah.
because that hasn't been compiled in yet for iPhone. Although I think it probably can be. I just haven't done it. It's not super critical. It's really only used by, I think, the number formatter, you know, the new number formatter that Laravel shipped a couple of versions ago. So if you're using that, you might bump into some issues. There's also, I mean, a big one is just PC NTL. So if anything that you're running in Laravel relies on PC NTL, things like Octane rely on it, for example. All of the queue background task stuff, any artisan things typically will rely upon it at some level. They're not going to work, and that's not just a case of we haven't got the extension. It's PCNTL is baked into PHP. We have to turn it off explicitly for iOS because iOS doesn't allow that kind of thing to happen on the device. So you can't have background tasks being executed by your app just willy-nilly. You have to follow Apple's specific APIs for doing that sort of thing. So we'll have a way to achieve the same results eventually, but if what you're trying to use relies upon some of those PHP APIs, then it's just not going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. There is one more question from Zigar from our Laravel Pune administrator. Is using embedded SAPI is different from the foreign function object in PHP?
Yeah, from my understanding, yes, very different. I mean, I've not used the FFI stuff too much, but basically, my understanding is that FFI is kind of slow. It's not as efficient as the SAPI interface, and it requires a lot of configuration to make it work with specific C headers and things. We'd have to do a lot more work to bring those two pieces together. It might be more efficient in some respects. Like data transfer, if you were doing a lot of data transfer across that interface, but we're not. Web requests are very small things. So a SAPI just makes perfect sense for this environment. And I think the embed SAPI that we're using is more than enough for now. If we needed to get to the point of FFI, and it would be a whole other level, I think, for this project. Maybe we'll get there, but yeah, that's like level 10. I think we're at like level 2 right now. So yeah, we've got a little way to go.
Yeah, level 2 versus level 10 thing. That native launched 10 years ago almost, right? And it's still not 1.0. So I assume we will get native PHP for 1.0 before React Native, right? When it is ready for production, like, do you have any roadmap that you can share with the community?
Yeah, native PHP for desktop is going through the final stages of a beta kind of rollout. We've been working really hard on getting that into a really good shape. That's going to be launching V1 for desktop in hopefully the next few weeks. I kind of penciled in the end of April as a kind of target,
Okay.
but that's coming up very soon. But as for the mobile stuff, I mean, I know there's a lot of things that are missing, and there might be bugs here. That's just classic because it's very new. But we've shipped apps to the store. We've got an app on the iPhone App Store. So I think this is very production ready right now. I want people to be building production apps with this right now. I think it's quite capable. So we've just got more features to build. That's all.
Awesome. Awesome.
Okay.
So I have one more question. When you use any third party or like a cross-platform framework, there is always a question about the cold start. How much time it takes when you click on the application and how much time you see the screen. I have seen so many white screen during my React Native time. So if you can elaborate or explain a little bit more about that, that would be grateful.
Okay. Yeah. Well, cold start is I mean, hopefully I don't want to spend too much time actually talking about cold start, but from a technical point of view, it's basically coming because you're trying to do a lot of stuff at the beginning of the application lifecycle. And one of the things that I've really tried to avoid here is doing too much work at the beginning. And this is one of the things that PHP is really good at. PHP is really good at cold starts from nothing. It's been honed over 30 years to get good at that. The only difference that we have is that in a normal web server environment, you'd be running PHP under something like FPM, where it's like primed and it's ready to go. So when a request comes in, you're not waiting for it to boot up and do everything. It's kind of ready. We don't have that here. But the great news is PHP is just so good at that on a modern device with a good like CPU, it's still going to be really quick. It's going to be so quick that I think it's imperceptible to the user. That's where we're at. That most users just won't notice any slowness with like the UI that when they're tapping buttons or using your application. They're just it's gonna feel like a properly native application. So I think that's going to be great for the kind of applications that we'll typically want to build. I think it's going to be
Right.
plenty.
So, like, yeah, one question is like someone is asking that, like, Do we need, can we like install the native PHP in the existing project, or do we need to like start a new project from scratch?
It can be installed in an existing project. Yep, totally. The complication with that is, as we've just talked about, the dependencies that you might have, the functionality that you might have there that's not available in the mobile environment. So you just have to think about that. You might bump into bugs, issues with how your application was built to operate, but now the tools that it requires or is reliant upon aren't available in the mobile environment. So my recommendation would be to start from scratch, but you definitely don't have to do that. This is just a composer package. So it's the easiest thing to get going. You just install the composer package, run a couple of commands, and it's basically ready to build for an iPhone or an Android. But yeah, just like, your mileage might vary depending on what your application was built to do. I think you're muted, Punyapal.
Yeah, Pinapal, you're
Yeah,
muted.
sorry. So, okay, like, Jigar is asking like how to contribute to native PHP.
So you can contribute today to desktop because it's fully open source. Like, you can just go to GitHub/NativePHP and find all of the repos, use it, find bugs, jump in on issues, jump in on the Discord, PR some stuff. That would be great. For mobile, we're not going to be able to take contributions just yet because it's closed source. It's a premium package. It's paid for, and we'd have some issues to sort out with licensing and things there to make sure that people are comfortable giving us their code. I mean, it's work, and I don't want to devalue what people are doing in any way. So we'll have to work that out in time. But yeah, for desktop, fully get involved. For iOS, I think or Android and iOS is just when you can use those tools, use them. Please feedback with the issues that you find, and we can get to work on fixing them, making it all better.
Right. And like one more question from the GR is like WebView is Apple's native API.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we haven't created any of that. That's just standard Apple stuff.
Okay, one more question from Jigar. That like we will have a like PPP pricing for native PHP, like for India.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't started looking at PPP, but in a grand way, people have come to me directly asking for some help there. I'm happy to receive requests on an individual basis at the moment. If you're interested in giving it a go, I will say I know the cost might appear to be high, but I think you can get a license right now. We announced earlier this week that it's even cheaper. So you can get a license to use it for just $50, which I think is very good, really, even in countries where it's a little bit difficult. Having said that, come to me. We'll work something out. I'll try and figure out a better approach going
Right.
forwards. And on that note, I would like to say that if you sign up to the newsletter, the Native PHP newsletter, which you can get to just by going to nativephp.com/newsletter. If you do that today, I'll send someone, a lucky person in that group, a max license. So you'll get to use Native PHP as much as you want for mobile. That is Native PHP for mobile, as much as you want. Yeah, and that'll have Android when it's ready. I appreciate that's not necessarily as applicable right now for everybody, just because we've only got iOS support. But Android will come in the next few weeks. So
Right.
yeah.
So like maybe it can be a joke, but like Peter is saying like when like the native PHP for Tesla being released.
Peter, you. Yes. So Peter is one of our core contributors on Native PHP. He's been doing loads of great work for us. Yeah, I think that's a joke, but I'm gonna, why not? let's get PHP running on a car. I mean, maybe we shouldn't do that because it's like right on the edge of, safety, and human life matters. So let's not take that lightly. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to see PHP work in some part of a Tesla, maybe just that big screen in the middle, and people can just interact with that. And it's not like in control of the self-driving mechanism or anything. But
Right,
yeah.
right. So like it may be possible with that pinout package, which is like built by the like Dan, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That would
Like
be so
Jigar
cool.
is again, Jigar is again asking like challenges you faced creating distributed PHP apps. I don't
Oh,
know. It
so
is
many
related.
challenges.
Uh,
Yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I mean, if it is related to native PHP or like your all of the other projects.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just
The,
yeah. If I just think about native PHP, distributed PHP in that way it was complicated to get things going. But I didn't do all of the hard work there. The static PHP CLI library that I talked about, the person who's working on that basically did a ton of hard work to make that possible. I had that Marcel Potiot, who helped out when I kind of first announced that I figured out how to do this. He kind of went and built the Electron stuff. I was working in Tory at the time, and yeah, he did amazing things there. So lots of challenges, but also lots of really smart people, lots of prior work, the AI stuff. It all helps. So yeah, you just kind of have to use all the tools that are available to you and exploit your skills as much as possible.
like maybe the last question, maybe like from me myself, like when you're coming to Laragon, India.
Oh,
Maybe next
let's
year.
see.
Next year.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, I keep seeing all the pictures and videos, and it's just like it looks so cool. I got was it from you, Vikas, or was it from somebody else? I was emailing about potentially going this year, but with speaking at Laracon EU and the follow up from all of this native PHP stuff, and just like I needed a bit of a break, honestly. So, yeah, it
Come as an attendee instead of speaker, and you can just enjoy the great weather and great food and everything. Yeah, so it will be a great
sounds
vacation. Yeah.
delightful. So I grew up in Birmingham in the UK, and there's a massive Indian community in and around Birmingham in the UK, and the food that I was just teased with as I was growing up was just amazing. I love Indian culture. I love Indian food, so I can't wait to go to India. But yeah, it'll be my first time there. I would love to be there to see a Laracon as well. So hopefully one day, maybe next year. I'll say maybe, but yeah, hopefully.
Mm. Okay, like one more question, like we collected while you was like showing the like all the things. Like why are you using still Sublime?
He says it very seriously, like, why?
I only
Why?
know.
Sublime is the
I only
greatest
know.
IDE ever invented. No, I use PHP Storm most of the time, but I like Sublime because it's very quick. Um, yeah, I think I
Mm.
might have. Yeah, it's just quick to open very
Right.
large files. Like PHP Storm is not very good at that sometimes,
Yeah.
just because it's trying to do a lot. But Sublime just gets out of the way, and I've used it for a really long time, so it's my go-to for that kind of thing.
Right, right. So like it's like if you're using like Android Studio or Xcode at the same time, you don't want to open the PHP store, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, okay. So from the point of view of you being the developer who's building iPhone and Android apps using native PHP for mobile, the goal is that you don't have to use things like Android Studio or Xcode at all. You will just use whatever you're used to using to build your Laravel application. And that's all you have to, excuse me, that's all you have to worry about for the most part. I think there might be occasions when you would have to like load up Xcode or load up Android Studio to try something out in a specific way. But I think we can get this, we've already got the iOS stuff. You have to have Xcode installed, but you don't need it running to be able to build for the phone, to run on a phone. You can do it all from the command line. So we do it through artisan commands. And you can do the same for the simulator. It will boot up the simulator and it will just load your application into the simulator. But yeah, and I think we'll do the same for Android. If we can possibly do it, we'll get it working in the same way. So it's just artisan commands, the workflow that you're used to, the tools that you're used to, the framework that you're used to, the web paradigm that you're used to, everything just really familiar. And now you're able to build mobile apps too.
Right. Like someone was asking like the about the size and speed, but maybe it's already answered, right? While the talk and the like other questions. But I wanna also like modify this question a little bit and ask you like uh like what was the biggest application you built with the iOS or like iOS, right? Mostly iOS. And like, was it like by increasing the size, like, did you find any like difference in speed of like the app
Okay, that's kind of a multi-layered question. I guess just first of all, by big, do you mean like the application's user interface
size?
being
Size.
like made up of lots of parts, or do you mean the megabytes size of the thing?
Both mostly because like
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, like an application could just be big because you've got like video files or big images in there. So that's not necessarily a big application. That just means that the binary is going to be bigger because it's got these hard to compress files inside of it. But like a big application that's got many screens, let's just call them screens for simplicity's sake, and lots of features, lots of stuff that you can do. When you think about what that is that makes that up, it's all text. So you've got JavaScript files, you've got CSS files, you've got Blade files, maybe. It might be TypeScript if you're doing it with that, React or Vue or something else. And the PHP and all of the composer dependencies that you're using. It's all text. So a typical sort of Laravel application, if you ignore all of the static files like images and videos and stuff, and just focus on the code files, it's probably going to be mostly under 100 megabytes. I mean, and that's probably with all of the the composer dev dependencies. We forget node dependencies. Like that's a whole other beast. You don't need most of that to run your application, just to build the front end, which is crazy. We remove all of that. We remove the dev dependencies. So right now, like even a sizable Laravel application is probably going to be somewhere in the region of like 25, 30, maybe 40 megabytes in size when it's all kind of stripped back, which is not that big. And the great thing about it is that it is just text. And so one thing that we can do, we don't do it yet for mobile, but we've just started doing it for NativePHP for desktop, is compressing all of that down. And because it's text, it compresses down really, really well. So we can compress things like a 20 meg Laravel application down to maybe 4 megabytes. And then it just becomes a single file. So you've got this 4 meg file that you can just plop into your application, and it will still run. So it will run exactly the same, and it's not going to be faster or slower, or it might be even faster, but there shouldn't be too much difference in the performance. And it's just going to be a lot smaller. So there's like all of these different things that we can start to do and we'll get there with mobile where we're using that as well. So yeah, the apps, I think they're going to be generally quite small. You know, if you look at the average app that you might download to your phone, they're quite big, annoyingly. Like, people who talk about small apps typically have spent a load of time and effort making it really small. But most people don't care about that. They just want it to work. They want it to work nicely. They want it to do what they've downloaded it for. So the size matters less. And with like the cost of the solid state drives coming down in the phones and things, more people have got more space, and so it's less of a worry from my point of view. Like, we're already doing really good on making those apps small, and we'll make them smaller, and it's going to be fine.
Yeah, like Shane seems interested to like join the Laracon India, so you may give him a company, right?
Yeah, no, we're going to
And
come holding hands, swinging down the street.
yeah,
Definitely.
okay, that's cool. Um, like I think that's for the day our talk,
Cool.
right?
Cool,
So
cool.
you may like want to announce that like giveaway thing again if you want, like the in the end of the stream.
Yeah, the giveaway. Did you mean the giveaway? Yeah, for the newsletter. So yeah, thanks. If you want to be in with the chance to get a license for native PHP for mobile, a max license, which is currently being put on sale for $250, you can get a chance to get one of those by joining the newsletter. So if you go to nativephp.com/newsletter, sign up. That's all you have to do. That's completely free. If you do that within the next, I don't know how many hours are left in my day. So midnight for me is in 7 hours from now, just under 7 hours. So if you do that in the next 7 hours, then I'll pick a winner at some point next week. I think by the end of next week, and I'll send you a license.
Cool. So yeah, you have Jigar bhai, you still have a chance to like contribute to native PHP if you're watching.
Yeah.
Because do you have any question?
I think I asked from my side. Yeah.
Okay, I'm also cool from my side, and like we don't have any questions from the audience which are not already answered, right? So I think
Yeah, we have gone through all the questions. And Simon, if you have any words or anything you would like to say, that is the current time right now.
See, like I got one question actually.
Well,
Sorry to stretch.
just one more question. It's fine.
Just one more question. No, actually, it's related to Laravel actually. So like,
Okay.
do planning to like build like mobile app with the native PHP for Laravel?
That's a really good idea. I don't know. Maybe I won't do that right now because I'm super busy with the native PHP 4
Yeah,
mobile
right.
stuff. But yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Hmm. Okay, then we can end the stream. Bye bye, everyone. Thanks for
Thanks for
joining.
coming. Yeah.
Yeah. So, bye bye.
Thanks, guys. It was great. See you soon.